The air in the obsidian court shimmered with cold opulence, thick with the scent of frost blossoms and the low hum of grav lamps embedded in the vaulted ceilings. Queen Valeira sat upon the throne of crystallized starlight, her spine perfectly straight, her expression unreadable. Her skin, the deep cerulean of twilight oceans, seemed to drink the light around her, and her hair, long, thick, and the exact hue of a summer sky at dawn, was braided with threads of silver that caught every flicker of movement. To the courtiers lining the chamber, she was perfection incarnate. Regal, untouchable, sovereign of the Elthery dominion. But beneath the surface, Valeira carried a silence older than the palace itself. A hollow ache that no decree, no treaty, no victory parade had ever filled. 10 solar cycles had passed since the Vexian raiders ambushed the royal convoy on the rings of Kalen. 10 cycles since she last saw the face of her husband, Prince Terran. His laughter cut short by plasma fire, his body never recovered. Now she received petitions, dispensed justice, signed death warrants with a steady hand. But inside, she moved through life like a ghost haunting her own skin. The heavy doors at the end of the hall groaned open, and the captain of the palace guard stepped forward, his ceremonial armor gleaming like polished onyx. "Your Radiance," he intoned. "The new human liaison has arrived from the Terran Concordat. He will serve on your personal detail as per the treaty." A ripple of murmurs passed through the court. Humans were still a novelty on Elthos, permitted only under strict diplomatic terms after decades of Cold War turned cautious alliance. Most Elthery found them fragile, loud, and strangely colored. Valeira raised a hand for silence. She had agreed to this arrangement reluctantly, more out of political necessity than desire. "Let him enter," she said, her voice cool and smooth as glacial ice. The soldier who walked in was tall, nearly as tall as an Elthery male, but broad in the shoulders in that uniquely human way, as though built for endurance rather than grace. He wore a charcoal gray uniform with minimal insignia, boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. He stopped 3 paces from the dais and bowed, not too deeply, not too shallowly, precisely respectful. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice low, calm, accented in that soft Terran lilt that always reminded her of wind through dry grass. And then she saw his face. Time shattered. Her breath left her in a silent gasp. Her fingers, resting on the arms of the throne, twitched. Her heart, steady for 10 long years, stuttered like a dying engine. The man before her wasn't Terran. Logically, she knew that. But the shape of his jaw, the way his dark eyes held quiet intensity, the slight crook in his nose, just like Terran's, broken once in a sparring match and never quite straightened, was too much. Even the way he held himself, with that quiet confidence masking a deeper weariness, echoed her lost love so precisely that for one dizzying moment, Valeira believed the gods had answered her silent prayers. She froze, not metaphorically, literally, every muscle locked. Her breath caught so tightly in her chest she thought she might shatter from the pressure. Around her, the court began to whisper again, sensing something amiss. The captain frowned. The human liaison straightened slightly, his gaze flickering toward her with concern. But Valeira could not move, could not speak, could only stare, her mind racing through 1,000 impossible thoughts. Was it a clone? A Vexian trick? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Or, most terrifying of all, was it really him? Her personal aide, Minister Roval, a stout, elderly Elthery with skin like storm clouds and eyes like obsidian beads, stepped forward discreetly. He cleared his throat. "Your Radiance?" he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. "Are you unwell?" The sound of his voice, so familiar and grounded, pulled her back from the edge of the abyss. Valeira blinked once, twice, and forced air into her lungs. She lifted her chin, composed her expression with the discipline of a lifetime of training, and gave a measured nod. "I am well," she said, her voice miraculously steady. "Welcome, Terran. State your name." The human paused, as though sensing the strange energy in the room but too disciplined to question it. "Joran Vale, Your Majesty," he said. Joran, not Terran. The name echoed in her mind like a bell tolling in an empty hall. Not her husband. And yet, how could 2 beings from different galaxies bear such an uncanny resemblance? "Joran Vale," she repeated, testing the syllables on her tongue. "You are assigned to my personal guard detail. Do you understand the gravity of this duty?" "I do, Your Majesty," he replied, meeting her gaze. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only quiet resolve. I will serve with honor. Valira gave a slight nod. Captain, see to his quarters and briefing. He will begin his watch at dawn. She rose then, gracefully, though her knees trembled beneath her robes. Court is adjourned. She swept from the chamber, her attendants trailing behind like shadows, her mind a storm of contradictions. Back in her private chambers, walls lined with luminivines that glowed faintly in the twilight, she dismissed everyone and stood before the full-length mirror of liquid silver. Her reflection stared back. Blue skin, blue hair, eyes too old for her face. Then she closed her eyes and saw Joran's face again, saw Terran's smile, felt the phantom warmth of his hand in hers. That night she barely slept. Joran's first week in the palace was strange. Not in the way he expected. He'd been briefed on Elthery customs. No direct eye contact during formal address. No loud noises in the inner sanctums. Never touch the Queen unless she is in mortal peril. But nothing had prepared him for the Queen's reaction to him. One moment she'd been regal and distant, the next, frozen. Utterly still, like she'd seen a ghost. And then, after that, she'd treated him with cool detachment, almost as if avoiding him. But Joran wasn't imagining things. He'd felt her gaze on him more than once during patrols. Not suspiciously, not angrily, almost wistfully. It unnerved him. He'd taken this assignment because he needed purpose after the war. Earth was rebuilding, but Joran had lost too much. His unit, his home city, his sense of belonging. The Concordat offered structure, duty, a chance to stand for something again. He hadn't expected to walk into a royal court and become the object of a queen's haunted stare. On the fifth evening, while standing watch outside the West Solarium, Joran spotted Valira alone on the balcony overlooking the Moonpetal Gardens. The twin moons of Elthos, Leora and Kale, bathed the landscape in silver and violet light. Frost shimmered on every petal, every leaf. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and yet the Queen looked utterly alone. He almost turned away. Protocol dictated he not disturb her unless summoned. But something in the set of her shoulders, the slight slump, the way her fingers gripped the railing, told him she wasn't just meditating. She was grieving. Before he could second-guess himself, Joran stepped onto the balcony. "Your Majesty," he said softly. She didn't startle, didn't turn, just whispered, "You resemble someone I once loved." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a raw, unguarded truth, spoken like a wound finally exposed to air. Joran hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "I didn't mean to remind you." "Death does not ask permission before it steals," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes, deep, luminous blue, flecked with silver, searched his face. "You even stand like him. Did you know that?" "No," Joran said. "I've never been to this system before." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh, if it didn't sound so broken. The universe plays cruel jokes sometimes. They stood in silence for a while, the frost between them glittering like stars. Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Do you know how to play Stella chess?" Joran blinked. "I know, but I'm a fast learner." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Good. Come. We play until the moon's set." That night changed everything. Stella chess was nothing like Earth's chess. The board was holographic, floating between them, pieces pulsing with bioluminescent energy. The rules were complex, layered, involving quantum probability and temporal recursion. Joran lost the first 3 games badly, but he didn't give up. He asked questions. He learned. By the 7th game, he managed to trap her Empress piece in a spatial loop. Valira laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. The sound was like wind chimes in a summer storm, bright and unexpected. "You're clever," she said, resetting the board with a flick of her wrist. "You're just letting me win," he countered, grinning. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you really think I'd allow that?" He met her gaze. "No, but you're enjoying teaching me." She didn't deny it. From that night on, their nightly Stella chess matches became tradition. Sometimes they spoke of strategy, sometimes of politics, sometimes of nothing at all. But slowly, carefully, they began to share stories. Joran told her of Earth, of rainy cities and neon skies, of music that made your bones hum, of friends lost in the orbital bombardments. Valira spoke of Terran, his kindness, his stubbornness, the way he could calm her storms with a single look. "You don't look like him," she said one night, watching Joran reposition his warlord piece. "Not truly." It's the way you hold your silence. Like it carries weight. I carry a lot of silence, he admitted. She nodded. So do I. Their bond deepened not through grand declarations but through quiet moments. Sharing moon wine after a tense council session, debating the ethics of AI sentience, arguing over the best way to cook skyfin, Joran preferred seared. Valira liked it raw with frost mint. They challenged each other, teased each other, and, without either of them meaning to, began to heal. But peace on Elthos was fragile. The first attack came without warning. Joran was on night watch near the eastern spire when the alarms blared. A deep, resonant gong that shook the palace to its foundations. Red emergency runes flared along the corridors, and Elthari guards sprinted past, weapons drawn. Intruders in the lower catacombs. A voice crackled over his calm, Vexian insignia confirmed. Valira's worst nightmare made flesh. Joran didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the royal chambers, heart hammering. He found Valira already armored, her ceremonial robes replaced with sleek combat gear, twin energy blades strapped to her hips. Her face was hard, her eyes blazing with fury and fear. They've come for the heart of Elthos, she said, referring to the ancient power core buried beneath the palace. A relic that powered the entire planet's defense grid. They won't get it, Joran said, drawing his pulse rifle. She looked at him, really looked at him, not as a replacement for Terran, not as a Terran stranger, but as Joran, loyal, brave, real. Stay close, she ordered. What followed was chaos. The Vexians had infiltrated through the old aqueducts, their bodies augmented with biomechanical armor, their eyes glowing red with neural implants. They moved like shadows, striking with brutal efficiency. Joran and Valira fought back-to-back through the lower halls, their movements falling into perfect sync. She was grace and lethal precision. He was raw power and tactical improvisation. When a Vexian lunged at her blind side, Joran intercepted with a rifle butt to the jaw. When three hostiles cornered him in a corridor, Valira unleashed a cryokinetic blast that flash-froze them solid. They reached the heart chamber just as the lead Vexian, a hulking warlord with a scarred face and a plasma cannon grafted to his arm, activated the extraction protocol. Queen Valira, the warlord sneered, his voice a distorted growl. We meet again. 10 years, and you still haven't learned to protect what's yours. Valira's face went white. Krail, she whispered. You're supposed to be dead. Krail laughed. Death couldn't hold me, but your husband's screams? Those echo in my dreams every night. Rage exploded in Valira's eyes. She charged, blades flashing. But Krail was ready. He fired the plasma cannon. Joran saw it happen in slow motion. The energy beam arced toward Valira's chest. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her. The blast hit him square in the shoulder, searing through armor and flesh. He cried out, collapsing to one knee, pain blinding him. Joran! Valira screamed, just as Terran would have. She didn't hesitate. With a roar of fury, she lunged, not at Krail's weapon, but at his face. Her blades found his throat before he could react. Krail gurgled, stumbled back, and fell. Silence descended, broken only by Joran's ragged breathing. Valira dropped to his side, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. Don't you dare die on me, she whispered fiercely. Not you. Not now. He managed a weak smile. Wouldn't dream of it, Your Majesty. She laughed wetly, tears streaking her blue cheeks. Stop calling me that. He passed out then, but not before seeing the raw fear and care in her eyes, the look she'd once reserved only for Terran, now given freely to him. He woke 3 days later in the palace infirmary, wrapped in bio-bandages that glowed with healing nanites. Valira was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on her arms, her blue hair spilling over the edge like a waterfall of sky. He watched her for a long time, his heart full of something too big to name. When she finally stirred, her eyes met his, and she didn't look away. You saved my life, she said. No, he replied softly. You saved mine. Long before tonight. She reached out, her cool fingers brushing his. I thought I'd lost you too. You didn't. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not a replacement, not a ghost, but a new beginning. Two wounded souls finding solace not in the past, but in each other. But their peace was short-lived. A week later, as Joran recovered and began light duties again, a coded transmission arrived from the Outer Rim. The Vexians weren't done. Krail had been just the vanguard. A fleet, bigger than any seen before, was gathering near the Curon belt. And their target wasn't just the heart of Elthos. It was Velaira herself. The Elthari High Command urged evacuation. "They want you dead, your radiance," Roval pleaded. "Flee to the lunar sanctuaries." But Velaira stood before the war map in the strategy chamber, her expression steely. "I will not run. Not again." Joran stepped forward. "Then we fight them." She turned to him. "It's suicide." "Maybe," he said, "but I'd rather die standing beside you than live hiding from your enemy." For the first time, she didn't see Terran in his eyes. She saw Joran whole, real, choosing her not out of duty, but out of love. She took his hand. "Then we prepare." What followed was a race against time. Engineers reinforced the planetary shields. Pilots trained in new formation tactics. Joran, drawing on his Earthside experience with guerrilla warfare, helped devise ambush strategies in the asteroid fields surrounding Elthos. And through it all, he and Velaira stole moments. Walking through the frost gardens at dawn, sharing silent meals, holding each other during nightmares. One night, as they stood on the highest balcony watching the stars, Velaira leaned her head against his shoulder. "If we survive this," she said quietly, "will you stay?" Joran looked down at her, his heart full. "I'm not going anywhere," she smiled. A true, unguarded smile. And for the first time in 10 years, the hollow ache inside her began to fill. But the Vexian fleet arrived sooner than expected. 30 warships, bristling with weapons, dropped out of warp just beyond the Curon belt. Their comms crackled to life across every channel. "Queen Velaira," a voice boomed. The same distorted growl as Krail's, but multiplied, amplified. "Surrender the heart, or we burn your world to ash." Velaira stood on the command deck, flanked by her generals and Joran. She activated the reply channel, her voice ringing with authority. "You want the heart?" she said. "Then come and take it." The battle began at dawn. Starfighters streaked across the sky like comets. Energy beams crisscrossed the heavens. The palace shook with every near miss. Joran coordinated ground defenses, his voice calm despite the chaos. Velaira commanded the fleet from orbit, her ship cutting through enemy lines like a blade through silk. But the Vexians were relentless. One by one, Elthari ships fell. The shields flickered. And then the unthinkable. A boarding party breached the palace. Joran and Velaira met them in the Obsidian Court, weapons in hand. They fought like legends, side by side, their movements a dance of survival and fury. But there were too many. Cornered near the throne, Velaira took a glancing blow to the ribs. Joran pulled her behind him, firing until his rifle clicked empty. "It's over," the lead Vexian snarled, raising his weapon. But then a new sound. A deep, resonant hum, building in pitch. The floor trembled. Light erupted from the center of the chamber. The heart of Elthos awakened. Velaira's eyes widened. "Impossible. It hasn't responded in centuries." And then they understood. The heart wasn't just a power source. It was alive. And it had chosen them. Energy surged through the chamber, throwing the Vexians back. The palace defenses reignited, tenfold stronger. Outside, the Elthari fleet rallied, empowered by the surge. The tide turned. By sunset, the Vexian fleet was in retreat, broken and burning. Silence returned to the Obsidian Court. Smoke curled from scorched stone. Joran helped Velaira to her feet. Her ribs were bruised, her lips split, but her eyes shone with triumph. "We did it," she whispered. "We did," he said. And then, in front of the entire court, she kissed him. Not out of desperation, not out of grief, but because in the face of death, love was the only answer that mattered. The court erupted in cheers. The heart pulsed gently, as if approving. But in the shadows of the Curon belt, a single Vexian scout ship lingered. Its commander watched the celebration through magnified lenses, his face grim. "The Queen lives," he muttered into his calm, "and she is no longer alone." He activated a hidden channel. "The target has changed. New orders: eliminate the human. Break her spirit before we break her world." The ship slipped into warp, vanishing into the void. The war wasn't over. But for now, in the heart of the palace, two souls stood together, blue and brown, alien and human, bound not by fate, but by choice. And that, for the moment, was enough. The victory celebration lasted only a night. By dawn, the euphoria had hardened into vigilance. Reports trickled in from the outer sectors. Vexian scout ships had been sighted near neutral trade lanes. Communications jammed, distress signals cut mid-transmission. The retreat had been too orderly, too precise, less a rout and more a calculated withdrawal. Velaira paced the war room, her bare feet silent on the cool stone, her blue hair tied back in a tight knot. She hadn't slept. Neither had Joran, who stood near the star chart, studying trajectory patterns with tired eyes. "They're regrouping," he said quietly. "Not just rebuilding. Adapting." Velaira nodded. "The Heart's awakening disrupted their tech. They'll come back with dampeners, maybe even anti-resonance fields." She turned to him, her gaze softening. "You should rest." "So should you," he replied, stepping closer. "You've got a cracked rib and you're still walking like you're made of titanium." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Old habit. Terran used to say I'd fight a sandstorm just to prove I could. And I'd say you're stubborn as a glacier," Joran finished, echoing a line he'd heard her use weeks ago during a Stella chess match. The reference hung between them, tender but no longer painful. She reached out, her fingers brushing his forearm, a gesture that had become as natural as breath. Before either could speak further, Minister Roval burst in, his storm-gray skin ashen. "Your Radiance, there's been an incident in the Eastern Archives." They arrived to chaos. Smoke curled from shattered data crystals. Scorch marks marred the ancient walls. And slumped against a collapsed shelf lay Kalen, Velaira's youngest archivist, a bright-eyed scholar who could recite the lineage of every Elthery house backward. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow. Cradled in his arms was a sealed memory orb, cracked but intact. "He tried to stop them," one of the guards said. "Two intruders. They wore Elthery uniforms, but their skin, it shifted. Like liquid." Velaira knelt beside Kalen, her hands glowing faintly as she channeled healing energy. "Shapeshifters," she murmured. "The Vexians have developed biomimicry." Joran examined the doorway. "They didn't come for data. They came for this orb." He held it up. The glassy surface flickered with unstable light. Back in the sanctum, they activated the orb. Holograms bloomed in the air, fragmented, encrypted. Velaira's fingers danced through the air, decrypting layers with practiced grace. Then the image resolved. A human colony, Terra Nova, burning. Joran went cold. "That's my home sector." The footage zoomed in. Among the wreckage, Vexian insignia, but also Terran military tags, and one unmistakable symbol etched into a ruined wall. The sigil of the Black Veil, a rogue human faction that had splintered from the Concordat years ago, rumored to traffic in alien tech and forbidden bioweapons. "They're working together," Joran whispered, horror dawning. "The Vexians and the Veil." Velaira's eyes narrowed. "This isn't just war. It's a trap designed to fracture the alliance. If the Concordat believes you're compromised, if they think Elthos colluded with terrorists, they'll withdraw support. Leave us exposed." Worse still, the orb contained coordinates. A rendezvous point in the Veil Nebula, and a single message, looping in a distorted voice. "The human dies. The queen breaks. Then Elthos falls." Joran clenched his fists. "They're targeting me to get to you." Velaira stood abruptly, her expression hardening into something ancient and dangerous. "Then we go to the Veil Nebula first." "No," Joran said sharply. "It's a suicide run. You can't risk yourself." "I'm not risking myself," she said, turning to face him, her eyes blazing. "I'm protecting what matters. And right now, Joran Vale, that's you." Their gazes locked. No words were needed. The bond between them had long passed the point of argument. It was trust, forged in fire. 2 days later, they departed aboard the Dawnchaser, a sleek Elthery stealth corvette retrofitted with Terran comms and cloaking tech Joran had helped design. The crew was minimal, just Roval as navigator, a pilot named Lyra with eyes like twin comets, and 2 elite guards. Velaira wore battle armor again, but this time, Joran wore an Elthery weave suit. Lightweight, adaptive, lined with bioreactive fibers that responded to his neural patterns. It hummed against his skin like a second heartbeat. The Veil Nebula was a graveyard of dead stars and ion storms, perfect for hiding. They found the rendezvous point near the ruins of an old mining station. Derelict, half swallowed by cosmic dust. Scans showed life signs. 2 ships. One Vexian, one bearing the crude markings of the Black Veil. "They're waiting for us," Lyra said, fingers flying over the console. "Good," Velaira replied. "Let them." Joran checked his pulse rifle, now modified with Elthery cryo rounds. "Once we're inside, I'll draw their fire." You get to the comms hub, download everything. And if they've booby-trapped it? She asked. Then we improvise, he said with a grim smile. They boarded through a maintenance hatch, moving like ghosts through the skeletal corridors. The station groaned around them, metal protesting under unseen stress. Then voices. They crouched behind a bulkhead. 2 Vexian commanders stood near a central console, flanked by 3 Black Veil mercenaries. Humans, scarred and tattooed, their eyes hollow with fanaticism. Confirmed, 1 Vexian growled. The Queen took the bait. She's aboard the Dawn Chaser. Once the human is dead, we broadcast the footage. The Concordat will disavow her. And the bioagent? A mercenary asked. Ready. Aerosolized. Once released in the palace ventilation, every L3 within hours will be paralyzed. Easy to harvest. Their neural tissue is worth more than starships. Joran's blood ran cold. Harvesting, not conquest. Profit. Velaira's hand found his in the dark. Her grip was tight, trembling not with fear, but fury. On silent count, they moved. Joran burst out first, firing cryo-rounds that flash-froze 2 mercenaries mid-turn. Velaira followed, her blades a blur of blue light, slicing through the 3rd before he could scream. The Vexians activated their armor shields, but Joran had anticipated that. He tossed a grav-pulse grenade he jury-rigged from scrap. The explosion overloaded their systems, shorting their shields. In seconds, it was over. Velaira accessed the console while Joran guarded the corridor. Data streamed across the screen, ship schematics, toxin formulas, names. And then, a face. Joran froze. On the screen was a man, older, harder, but undeniably familiar. His eyes held the same stubborn set as Joran's. His name scrolled beneath. Commander Dane Vale, Black Veil Liaison. My father, Joran whispered, the words ash in his mouth. Velaira turned, her expression stricken. Joran! He'd believed Dane died in the Battle of Titan's Ring, that he'd gone down with his ship, a hero of the Concordat. But here he was, alive, collaborating with monsters, helping design weapons to destroy the very people Joran now called allies. I didn't know, Joran said, his voice raw. I swear I didn't. I know, Velaira said, stepping close. Blood doesn't define loyalty. Choices do. Before he could respond, alarms blared. The station's self-destruct sequence had been triggered remotely. Go! Joran shouted, shoving the data drive into his pocket. They sprinted through collapsing corridors, debris raining down. Lyra's voice crackled in their earpieces. 30 seconds to detonation. Get to the extraction point. They leapt across a widening chasm as the floor gave way. Joran slipped. Velaira grabbed his arm, hauling him up with strength that defied her slender frame. They reached the hatch just as the Dawn Chaser's ramp lowered. Lyra pulled them aboard as the station exploded behind them, a silent bloom of fire in the void. Back on Elthos, they debriefed in secret. The data was damning. Worse, it revealed a mole inside the palace. Someone with high-level clearance feeding intel to the enemy. Paranoia spread like frost. 2 nights later, Joran awoke to the scent of smoke and the sound of breaking glass. He rolled from his cot just as a dagger embedded itself in his pillow. He spun, pulse rifle ready, but the room was empty. Only a single note lay on the floor, written in Terran script. You don't belong here, traitor's son. He showed it to Velaira at dawn. She read it once, then incinerated it with a flick of her wrist. They're trying to turn us against each other. They already have, he said quietly. Half the court looks at me like I'm carrying a bomb. She took his face in her hands, her touch cool and sure. Let them look. I know who you are. But even her faith couldn't stop the next blow. It came during the Unity Summit, a gathering of allied species meant to renew the Concordat Pact. Velaira stood at the podium in the Grand Atrium, Joran at her side as her sworn guard. As she spoke of peace, of unity, a figure stepped forward from the delegation, Ambassador Threx of the Kfori. Before we sign, Threx said, his voice oily, we demand verification. Queen Velaira claims no collusion with the Black Veil. Yet her human guard is the son of Dane Vale, one of their chief architects. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Velaira's composure didn't crack. Joran Vale severed ties with his father's legacy long ago. He has proven his loyalty with blood. Blood can be faked, Threx sneered. Or coerced. Prove it. Hand him over for neural interrogation. Joran stepped forward. I'll undergo it. No, Velaira said sharply. It's the only way, he replied. If I refuse, they'll think you're hiding something. Neural interrogation was brutal, a direct link to the mind, extracting memories whether you wanted to share them or not. Many didn't survive. That night, in the silent hours before the procedure, Valira found Joran on the balcony. He was staring at the twin moons, his expression unreadable. "If I don't come back," he began. "You will," she cut in, "because I'll be holding your hand the entire time." He looked at her, eyes wide. "You do that? It's dangerous. The feedback could burn my mind out." She smiled faintly. "I've survived worse, and I'm not losing you to fear." The next day, in the sterile white chamber, they lay side by side on the neural cradle, linked by glowing filaments. As the machine whirred to life, memories surged. Joran's childhood on Terra Nova. The day he learned his father was declared dead. His enlistment, the battles, the grief, the moment he saw Valira frozen on the throne and felt something shift inside him. And through it all, Valira was there. Not just observing, but feeling. His pain, his hope, his love for her, quiet and steadfast. When it ended, she sat up first, tears streaking her cheeks. She turned to the assembled dignitaries, her voice ringing with authority. "Joran Vale's mind is clean, his heart cleaner still. If any of you doubt his loyalty, you doubt mine." Ambassador Threx left in silence. But the real enemy was still hidden. Days later, while reviewing security logs, Joran noticed an anomaly: Roval's access code used in the catacombs at odd hours. He brought it to Valira, heart heavy. She refused to believe it. "Roval served my mother. He watched me take my first steps." "People change," Joran said gently. "Or they're blackmailed." They set a trap. That night, they faked a data transfer, the heart's core frequency supposedly vulnerable. They watched from a hidden vantage as a cloaked figure entered the chamber. It wasn't Roval. It was Lyra, the pilot, the one with comet eyes. She inserted a data spike into the console. Valira stepped into the light. "Why Lyra?" Lyra turned, her face calm. "My brother was harvested on Xylos. The Vexians paid the Black Veil to do it. I joined to find those responsible." She gestured to Joran. "But then he showed up, son of the man who designed the harvesters. I thought, if I framed him, the Queen would cast him out. The alliance would fracture. The Vexians would come for the heart, and I'd kill their commander myself." "You nearly got us all killed," Joran said. "I know," she whispered. "But revenge makes you stupid." Valira didn't arrest her. She offered her a choice: exile or redemption through service. Lyra chose the latter. But the damage was done. The Black Veil, sensing their plans unraveling, made their move. A distress call came from Terra Nova, Dane Vale himself broadcasting live. "Joran," the man said, his face gaunt, eyes haunted. "Come alone, or I release the bioagent on every Elthery world." It was a bluff, probably, but neither could risk it. Valira prepared the Dawn Chaser. "I'm coming with you." "No," Joran said. "This is my ghost to face." She gripped his arms. "Then let me give you something to bring back." She kissed him, deep, desperate, full of everything she couldn't say. "Come home to me." He nodded. "Always." As the ship launched into the void, Valira stood on the observation deck, watching until it vanished among the stars. And in the quiet, she whispered a prayer to gods she wasn't sure listened anymore. But far away, in the ruins of a dead colony, a father waited for his son. And the real twist, the one no one saw coming, was that Dane Vale wasn't the mastermind. He was the bait. And the true enemy was already inside the palace walls, wearing a familiar face, waiting for the Queen to be alone. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. Joran didn't find a monster waiting on Terra Nova. Only a broken man. Dane Vale, gaunt and trembling, confessed everything. He'd been captured years ago, forced to design weapons under threat to Joran's life. The Black Veil had faked his death, used his name as a shadow. He'd spent the last decade sabotaging their work from within, leaving trails only his son would recognize. Together, they dismantled the bioagent lab and transmitted its destruction to Elthos as proof. Back in the Obsidian Court, Valira stood not on the throne, but at the foot of the dais, waiting. When Joran stepped through the great doors, she didn't greet him as a queen. She ran to him, blue hair flying, eyes bright, and wrapped her arms around him as if she'd never let go. The court watched in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they bowed, not to their queen, but to the truth they'd witnessed. That love, not blood or species, was the truest form of loyalty. Weeks later, the Concordat renewed its pact with Elthos, stronger than ever. Lyra piloted peace missions. Roval, cleared of all suspicion, retired to tend moon-petal gardens. And in the heart of the palace, a new tradition began. Every evening, a human and a blue-skinned queen played stella chess on the balcony, laughing beneath twin moons, their hands brushing more often than the game required. The Vexians still lurked in the dark, but they no longer frightened her, because Velyra had finally stopped grieving the past and started building a future. One quiet night, as frost sparkled on the petals below, Jorn turned to her and said, "Stay with me?" She smiled, lacing her fingers through his. "I already am."